Hello again. Mid-January 2015. Now, I did want to start talking about the election that's coming up in this country. But of course, what with the massacre and horror of what happened in France, I have to say a few words about that. And I have to say also a few words about free speech. The Charlie Hebdo, Jewish delicatessen massacres, murders, or whatever you want to call them, slaughters, have been totally and absolutely condemned, as of course they should have been. But I want to know, why is it that Muslims in this country and in France and in Europe are supposed to apologise for this? They don't agree with it any more than what we do. Yeah, there are a few fanatics, a few nutters that probably dig it, but the rest of us and the rest of the Muslim population, to my experience, and remember I do live in Whitechapel, don't think this at all and utterly condemn it. So I don't see what this hypocrisy is that they've got to apologise for it, because they're never into it at the very beginning. You've got to remember that Muslims are mostly the victims of these nutcases. For every person slayed in Europe, there's thousands slayed in northern Nigeria by Boko Haram, like there was last week, in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Islamic State fighters, and Taliban, al-qaeda and other groups like that have been committing massacres of their fellow Muslims for years, in schools, volleyball games, marketplaces. It just goes on and on and on. So just remember, it's Muslims that are the victims of these bombings and killings and slayings mostly. That's not to excuse the killings and slayings that occur here, incidentally, or in the rest of the Western world or anywhere else. There's no excuse for it. We're at war with these people, but not in the sense that our government is. We're at war ideologically. Being anarchists, of course, we're against authority, we're against the state, and of course we're against religion. But free speech, I'd like to say in this country, here, that really we only have the impression of it. In other words, we don't. Reading the Daily Mail, the Guardian, watching the BBC, reading the Sun and listening to the Radio 1 and the World Service is not free speech. Our media is controlled by a small, almost tiny, economic and social elite. About half a dozen people own all the newspapers in Britain. It's all right talking about free speech, but free speech is absolutely worthless unless you do something about it, unless you actually practice it. But it seems to be that most people that do practice free speech end up being denigrated by the population and by the medium. So why condemn people that do free speech? Because, as I say, we don't have any free speech or free expression in this country. This is not a free country. It's merely that we have less repression than other countries, or a lot of other countries on this planet. And having less censorship and less repression does not make us free. And also, if our government is so concerned about free speech, how comes it's opened up a naval base a few months ago in Bahrain? Why does it need a naval base in Bahrain anyway? Where for years the population has been out on the streets demonstrating for democracy, or something like it anyway, against the absolute monarchy that they have there in Bahrain. And why is it that we never say anything about what happens in Saudi Arabia, where there's absolutely no free speech whatsoever? But of course they're our allies, and so therefore it's all right. The TV program last week, Angry, White and Proud, that was broadcast, was quite instructive, because it shows our irrational fanatics and all their unpleasantness, and coming into confrontation with the equally odious Islamic fundamentalists on the streets of the UK. The only question is, what will it be first? Will it be a female suicide bomber blowing herself up on the public transport system here in Britain? Or will it be a racist bombing that kills innocent Muslims in their home? Whatever it is, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen here, and the aftermath is going to be absolutely appalling, unless those that really do believe in freedom and free speech come out on the streets and do something about it. So remember the 7/7 bombings, but also remember the David Copeland bombings of 1999 as well, which had absolutely nothing to do with Muslim fundamentalism and more to do with British identity. So, as I said, there is no free speech here. Well, there is the freedom to do absolutely nothing, to agree with what the government says, to agree with what the media says. And given all the almost certain mass dissatisfaction that's going to come and emerge after the 2015 elections in this country, we will see how free we are able to express ourselves, in particularly in that most important forum, the streets. At the end of last year, almost unnoticed or unreported by our own glorious free media, the Occupy movement tried to have a occupation of Parliament Square, where it was brutally and irrationally repressed by the police, and yet this was not reported. With an almost sort of East European Iron Curtain-like mentality that we've got in this country, where dissidence is just either not reported or smashed down and then not reported. But they won't be able to cope when there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us out on the streets in permanent session, and not only on the streets but in occupied spaces that we take, we the public, we the great British public. And it could happen this year in the aftermath of the 2015 elections, where I do believe there will be a hung parliament and mass dissatisfaction. So free speech is absolutely worthless unless you do something about it. And freedom is not something that's given to us from above. It's something that we have to take, and always has to be taken from the bottom. And I look forward to when it happens, and I look forward to when we awake out of our slumber. And that's all I've got to say at the moment. And hopefully, after this Charlie Hebdo and these massacres, we can now get on with reporting the run-up to the election.